Unfortunately, I won't be able to be in class today, so I decided to narrate a little presentation for you. Um, and the title is Reading Literature in Composition Courses. So, undergraduate composition holds a special place amongst the boundless courses and majors offered at universities, simply because it is one of the only classes required by all students, regardless of their major to take. Traditionally, university composition courses have fallen under the purview of English programs. However, around the 1960s, scholars and educators from the US and UK convened at Dartmouth College to discuss the problem of teacher and text composition theory, which dominated schools at the time. Their main contention was that the overall scope of the current theory was centered around the subject of English instead of the students in the class. In other words, the Dartmouth Conference moved to place more emphasis upon the student as a social being who learns and uses writing to explore and express their goals and aspirations, and most importantly, themselves. Interestingly enough, roughly 60 years later, the same discussion continues. In his journal, The Problem of Literature in Composition Classes, Greg Schaefer contends effusively for the separation of literary study and compositional instruction. For as long as literature has a place in our composition courses, it will, quote, usurp the participation of the student and transform the writing class into a glorified study of literary analysis. Moreover, Schaefer yokes this notion to the pedagogical work of Peter Elbow and Donald Murray, which theorizes that writing is a process wherein, through recursive episodes of reflection and transactive activity between the student and words, they are able to achieve self-actualization. In the language of Elbow and Murray, it is cooking and growing, exploration, discovery of meaning, discovery of form, and the writer works back and forth so that he can discover what he has to say and how to say it more efficiently. In consequence of this relatively new idea, composition courses have been pushed to the periphery of English departments, and in some cases completely outside of its purview. The immediate byproduct is one where reading becomes a subordinate role in the compositional classroom. The only reading is the instructor providing a few readings focused on development of rhetorical strategies, as well as the majority of classroom time tailored to promote self-expression, reflection on societal and controversial issues, etc. In other words, a student is hardly exposed, let alone encouraged to study literature. Furthermore, literary study in the composition course is slowly being marginalized. This is odd considering at the inception of higher American education, the study of literature and composition have worked in tandem to produce well-informed and well-rounded students. Not to mention both areas of study fell under the responsibility of the English department. Moreover, the close relationship between these two disciplines, if one should prefer to separate them, has arguably been the most promising path to producing competence in the fields of rhetoric, reading, and ultimately writing. Consider the conclusions drawn by the ancient Roman rhetorician Quintilian in his Institutio Oratorio. This profession of grammar, then, distinguished as it is most compendiously into two parts, the art of speaking correctly and the illustration of the poets, carries more beneath the surface than it shows on its front. For not only is the art of writing combined with that of speaking, but correct reading also precedes illustration, and with all these is joined the exercise of judgment. In short, the two fields have always been viewed together, and better yet, have always worked together under the jurisdictional prudence of English departments. But perhaps drawing conclusions based upon how education has traditionally perceived these two disciplines is missing the point, the point critics like Schaefer are trying to make. Indeed, their basis is rooted in a genuine concern for the student. However, be that as it may, the potential downside of this new pedagogical approach is that it fundamentally misunderstands or worse ignores the directly proportional relationship between reading literature and writing. See, literature in this case is valuable insofar as it shapes a student's ability to write and read their own writing for the gist of their thought. How students decide to revise a text is largely dependent on their understanding of the text. Unskilled writers have never learned how to read and evaluate text in their entirety, to respond to overall semantic structure of text, or to evaluate semantic structure against their intentions. Now, obviously, I've skipped. There's a lot of things, a lot of ground that I haven't covered, for the purpose of time, at least in terms of what we should be reading in the classrooms, the canon of literature, all of those kind of um, huge points, and more or less the issue that a lot of these proponents of this new idea have. I would have to break down the essence of writing and all of those things, which will be done in my paper. However, I just wanted to present a kind of rough schematic of kind of the direction I'm going in. So opportunities for reform. That's ultimately what we're after here. Is It's to bridge the compositional instruction with the study of literature, but also emphasize its ultimate goals: good writing and self-discovery of the student. I like Wayne Booth's quote when he says, "In the study of literature, the study of literature is a stimulus for thinking and writing as a source of subject matter, and as a model for style and grammar. Imaginative literature is, as the students say, the best thing with which they can come into contact. For without the lifeblood of literature, the teaching of composition becomes a form of rule-driven linguistic engineering." You see, I think the the intense study of literature within the composition class is important, extremely important. I believe that is the key to producing good writing in our students. However, there's a tendency for that aspect of composition, that aspect of learning how to write, eclipses, uh, just basic compositional instruction. It also eclipses kind of the role of the student and really tapping into the ultimate purpose of writing, and that is to discover oneself, to reflect on deep ideas. Um, I think we need to delve into, not as much as the practical approaches of writing, um, its practical uses, but more or less what it does for the student as a whole, as a human. So more of a humanistic approach to where we bridge the gap, I guess you could say, come together with the study of literature and composition, not overshadow the student's importance, but also not neglect the study of literature. Um, Obviously, this has to be hashed out a bit more, and it is in my paper, but for the purpose of time, that's kind of the direction I want to go in. I think both sides are vitally important to producing good writing. Um, the issue is if we take one side and leave the other, then we're missing part of the puzzle. Um, so that's essentially the direction I'm going in with the paper, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.